Hi, I'm Rachel. I'd usually be joined by my cat Leia behind me. Right now she's hiding under some dressers to the side of the camera. We went to the vet today. She's not very happy with me. Leia actually hasn't been feeling that great for a little while now. I've been discussing on some of my videos. It's not her first time in recent history to the vet, and we're going to a specialist later in the week. Money is pouring out of my checking account. I'm a little nervous about the health of my cat. It might not be the best time, I suppose, to do a discussion video, but it seemed like a good time in the current events of BookTube, concerning ShakeTube and other recent videos. And also, speaking of recent videos, Sylvia Kay just did a discussion video and she encouraged me to get back into the fold of that. And, well, I scripted something, so hopefully I'll stay on track. I've been following along curiously with the ShakeTube videos of these past few weeks. This is a multi-week read-along of Shakespeare plays started by Lukash Books and my former reading buddy Curtis of Curtis Books and Films. I haven't actually been participating, largely to do with my favorite hashtag, but in this last week they got to the play which I have the most feelings about. And guys, was it a coincidence that you read this particular play the week before Yom Kippur? Lots of Jewish heightened identity going on here. The play in question is The Merchant of Venice, which admittedly I haven't read in its entirety in a long time. And to answer Steve Donahue's question from his Merchant of Venice video, I first read the play when I was in 9th grade. I was an evolving reader, and most of what I remember was grappling with this cruel and farcical reminder that I wasn't being represented, to use modern-day jargon. If you're a straight, white, able-bodied Christian man of our age, chances are you can look at most of Western canon, the literature that defined our culture throughout the ages, and realize that you were considered to be a human being. As a woman and as a Jew, I've not always had that luxury. And that is why I am an advocate of publishing and reading diverse books in our modern age, even perhaps at the expense of reading time for some of the classics. This brings me to another BookTube discussion that Steve threaded through his Merchant of Venice video. Recently, Eric Carl Anderson took the classics to task for their occasional xenophobic natures and questioning whether or not we should give them a free pass. The opposite end of that argument is, if we are widely dismissing these books, is that censorship? I have a personal rule of thumb when it comes to the classics question, or really any book question. I like to call a spade a spade. And now I'm going to test if I can live up to that assertion. For example, one of my favorite novels is Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. I think it's a haunting and moving Bildungsroman about a girl who struggles against an oft indifferent society to say that she has and deserves a voice of her own, amongst other things. But Bronte also relies upon some racist stereotypes in making the mad woman of the attic character Bertha. She infers that because of Bertha's Creole heritage, she is psychotic. I mean, it's not like we see other Creole people wandering around living normal, productive lives here. These are popular stereotypes of the day about how contact with African blood might make you savage, and the dangers of interracial mixings. I'll leave a link below to a detailed article about this from the British Library. So a spade is a spade. Just because Bertha's depiction wasn't seen or challenged in its own day as being racist doesn't mean it's not racist. By calling that out, I don't want to ban Jane Eyre or other problematic novels. Yes, we should read the classics. We should understand the worldview from which these problematic elements come, and we should also look into what else these books entail too. But I'm also worried that when the opposing side shuts down conversation about problematic elements in books, they're, well, shutting down conversation. They'll whip out a "you can't judge a classic based on modern standards," basically so that they can ignore racism, sexism, and other xenophobia. And that's literary dishonesty. Words have meaning. I'm going to dial this up to a 9 for an example and use the term marital rape, which in my country wasn't illegal in all 50 states even in my lifetime. But rape, as a definition, is when one or more people forces another or more people to have sex against their will. What does it matter whether they're married or not? It's still against their will. Words have meaning. We're bookish people. We should respect that. It's society that takes a while to catch up, if it ever does. So if you're still with me, let's return to The Merchant of Venice. In a nutshell, it's a play about a bunch of Christians that are strapped for cash. They go to get a loan from the Jewish moneylender Shylock, and as collateral, Shylock demands a pound of flesh from the merchant of Venice, Antonio, if he can't repay the debt in time. Antonio agrees to this. Lo and behold, he loses his fortune, or thinks he does, on the sea. Shylock comes to claim the debt. They end up in court where Portia, a young woman attached to the dudes of the play, dresses up as a lawyer, bests the Jew, who then loses his holdings and his religion, disappears from the play to never be heard from again, because this is a comedy, and we have to focus on the happy Christian couples. I may have not read the play in its entirety for a while, but I've read lots and lots of academic scholarship, and plus lengthy quotes from the play. Earlier this year, I read Howard Jacobson's modern retelling of The Merchant of Venice, Shylock Is My Name. I don't actually think that the novel was very well executed, but it did make me focus more centrally on the character of Portia. Jacobson saw her as the true villain of the play, and you can't deny that there's something a little off with that lady. Was there a Renaissance stereotype for the gold digger? I mean, she was already wealthy herself. Why did she need Bassanio to woo her with a lot of money in the first place? Then there was that casket thing, which is basically a gotcha moment for her suitors. So cool, she finds the one who values her over money, always a good thing, but then she tricks all the other ones into never asking another woman for their hand in marriage again? And yet Bassanio needed money to woo her? If Portia were alive today, she'd make a killing on Twitter, constantly using the platform to shame others and never turning an eye inward. Portia is fascinating because she's one of the only Shakespearean women with any true agency of her own. She chooses to go out into the world, put on the vestments of a lawyer, and best Shylock. Which I imagine is part of the comedy, too, that a woman has to save all of her poor, struggling menfolk. The other two women of the play are as thin as paper. Nerissa is basically Portia's yes gal, and Jessica is a chew toy who exists between her father's evil Judaism and her lover's goodly Christianity. During the trial, Portia makes a famous speech about the quality of mercy, and there's something very hypocritical about it. Portia is not a merciful person. Her mercy relies on trickery and, well, revenge. It's a technicality. She links Shylock's claim for a pound of flesh to drawing Antonio's blood, which was not part of the deal, and then can claim that Shylock the Jew wanted to kill Antonio the Christian. In the process, she refers to Shylock as an alien, which is a blatant reminder of the power that Christians held over Jews in Venice. They're seen as subhuman. I mean, there's this whole stipulation about how horrible it is for a Jew to try to kill a Christian. This alien who isn't allowed full rights in the city. Nothing at all said about what would happen if the opposite were true. And then this allows Antonio, Shylock's bitterest enemy, to foist his ultimate revenge and force Shylock to convert. I don't know if Shakespeare meant to question the morality of forced conversion, because as has been seeded throughout his play, Jews aren't seen as people. And Shakespeare himself probably never met a Jew. Jews were banned from living in England for centuries before he wrote the play. The Jew was a convenient stereotype of his day for evil entity. Christianity was seen as a better religion than Judaism, so for Shylock to have to convert might be seen as a happy ending in and of itself. I'll touch on the question of Shylock's humanity later. I want to ask why Shakespeare wrote this play. Maybe scholars would disagree with me, but I would think the most obvious answer is that he wrote it to entertain people. He was a playwright, he was writing a comedy, he needed to make a salary. And as such, he looked for a convenient, one-dimensional evil entity character for his audience to mock and to root against. So enter Shylock, the Jewish moneylender. If the play had a deeper message, I would think it would be to remind the Christian audience to strive for mercy over revenge. That's the essence of Portia's mercy speech, to equate Shylock's vengeance with a backward Old Testament, and then to equate Antonio with the enlightened New Testament. And that's the anti-Semitic backbone of the play, writing off Jews, our practices, our culture, our relationships to our holy texts as evil. Never mind that Shakespeare, again, probably never met a Jew, much less ever studied Judaism. So here are Shylock's flaws: his eye for an eye vengeance, and his greed. At one point he infers that he'll miss his gold more than he will his daughter. And of course his claim for a pound of flesh. These are all anti-Semitic stereotypes that paint every Jew as a greedy, miserly, evil entity who, to go into actual Christian mythology and folklore, steals babies, Christian babies, to bake into Passover matzah. Hence the pound of flesh. Again, I've seen this argument crop up that when people decry problematic literature, other people who want to ignore that claim it's just fiction, which as a fiction enthusiast really gets my goat. But even more than on an intellectual or emotional stage, fiction can have tangible, real-world consequences. You know that Christian babies killed to make Passover matzah story? For centuries, Jewish villages were razed to the ground. Homes, businesses, and synagogues pillaged and burned. Jews raped and killed based on these tales. And an article in the Smithsonian Magazine writes that between 1933 and 1939, Nazi Germany staged more than 50 productions of The Merchant of Venice. The article quotes scholars who say, Hitler's willing directors rarely failed to exploit the anti-Semitic possibilities of the play, and the director planted extras in the audiences to shout and whistle when Shylock appeared, thus cueing the audience to do the same. At one point, a Hitler youth leader commissioned a production to celebrate that Vienna had been cleansed of Jews. But to return to the play itself, hey, maybe Shakespeare included Shylock's "hath not a Jew eye" speech to infer that someone can be a Jew and a human at the same time. I've been grappling with this speech for years and I still don't think I have a conclusion about it. Do I think that Shakespeare meant for Shylock to come off as three-dimensional? That wasn't the purpose of his plays. Writers of his day didn't worry about three-dimensional characters the way that has become popular in much of modern literature. It could be cleverness on Shakespeare's part, or maybe something striving for empathy. I mean, he introduced a character who, up until this point, was a walking, talking anti-Semitic stereotype. The obvious thing for Shylock to do in the courtroom would be to remove his clothes and show off his horns and his devil's tail. Instead, he delivers this speech which could throw the audience for a loop. Like, wait, what? Is the Jew human? And does that make the Venetians kinda dicks? I don't think the Jew equals human hypothesis is borne out given the ending of the play. But maybe Shakespeare used the speech to poke fun at some of his other characters. Or maybe what Shakespeare got with that speech is how even lower creatures who are treated badly tend to want to lash out and seek revenge. You can see that with a whipped horse or a kicked dog. Or back during American slavery, whites legally didn't see blacks as full people, and yet they used verses from the Bible to try and suppress revolt. And that's more or less what's happening with the biblical commentary in The Merchant of Venice. Don't be like the vengeful Jew. Be like the merciful Christian. Best of all, you have this have your cake and eat it too caveat, where mercy can also mean stripping a Jew of his holdings and his religion, because those Christ killers aren't full humans anyway. A spade is a spade, and anti-Semitism is anti-Semitism. Sometimes it's even used to propagate more anti-Semitism. I don't want The Merchant of Venice to be banned or burned, but if we continue to read it, and I know that we will, I hope that we can use it to discuss bigoted stereotypes and what it means when you decide that a group of people aren't human. We talk a lot about the danger of censoring books, but there's also a danger in censoring dialogue. I have a lot of links to leave down below. I have Goodreads reviews of The Merchant of Venice, and Shylock is my name. I'll leave links to the thoughtful videos that other booktubers have made that have propelled me to make this, and also the articles that I've mentioned. I'm just a small fry booktuber myself, a little nervous about how I'll be perceived, but people like Steve and Eric and Lukash Books and Curtis Books and Films keep on creating and encouraging these thoughtful videos, so I feel compelled to respond. So thanks so much for watching, everyone, and I'll see you next time.